Perfect. So, good evening, everyone. I am Cassandra. I am part of the Malta Association of Physiotherapists. And today we are collaborating with NOI UK and Martina will be introducing herself very soon, who will be talking to us about pain today. Um, we will be monitoring the chat, so if you have any questions during this webinar, feel free to jot them down and we'll answer as many questions as possible at the end of the session. So I'll let Martina introduce herself now.
Thank you, Cassandra. Thank you for having me for this webinar. Thank you for all the participants. I unfortunately can't see any faces, but I know you're out there. So I know it's late in Malta. It's after work lecture. For me, it's early morning. I'm coming to you from Melbourne, pretty much the other side of the world. So it's an early start here. But I'm really pleased to have a chance to talk to you about pain. It's been a passion of mine for over 20 years. I'm with Noe since 2003. I'm swapping between Germany and Australia, hence the accent. But the reason this webinar came about was I've got a little affinity to Malta because this is where I did my hospital internship during my physio training. I think I just was drawn to a different experience, and ever since then have been coming back. So I'm slightly familiar with Malta, and yeah, this is very exciting, even on a personal level, to be able to talk to you. From a professional background, I'm a physiotherapist. My master's in the area of pain, and since then I've been working mainly with persistent pain patients, either in a pain management program or in private practice. So during my work week, I'm between an interdisciplinary pain management program and a couple of private physiotherapy practice who are specialized on complex pain patients. So this is my background, but I know we only have an hour and pain is very complex. So let's get started if you're okay with that.
Yes, thank you, Martina. We really look forward to hearing more from your end.
All right, good. So maybe just an overview. Pain is a massive problem worldwide. It doesn't matter if we're in the northern hemisphere or in the southern hemisphere. We're seeing an epidemic proportions with persistent pain. And so I looked at a couple of up-to-date numbers, what we're seeing here, and focused on Europe here. The numbers haven't changed in many years, even though the official numbers which I stated haven't changed. So it's about 20% of people which are dealing with persistent pain worldwide, in this case also in Europe. But there is a tendency going up. And I think long COVID has a lot to do with it. Mental health has a lot to do with it. Social pressures have a lot to do with it. And hopefully that will become clearer as we go through the hour. Why pain education in all of this? Since 2018, the IASP, which is the International Association for the Study of Pain, where all the country chapters are sort of part of, has called for more realization that we need to put some effort into educating not only our patients, but also our healthcare professionals, our public and government bodies to, for example, even provide funding to have these pain management programs running, to allow for time for teaching. In Germany, there's a big push from the German Pain Society to try to make pain science mandatory in the medical degree. I don't know how the Maltese universities operate, but in Germany, it's a constant tug of war between the pain societies and the universities to make at least 15 hours of pain science compulsory during a medical university degree. This is not much. So if we really consider, so they're trying to push for making it more of a content in the training. And as I said, we know that pain care is essential, and it's across disciplines. It doesn't matter if I have a neurology patient or an orthopedic patient or a cardio patient. It goes across the disciplines. And there's a lot of push now to respect someone's pain as what the person says it is. So pain is a very personal and existential situation for someone. So it comes with a very ethical approach here. So, but we also know, as I said, no one has the answer. It doesn't matter if you're physio, OT, psychologist, doctor, where no one has the answer yet. So it always takes a team approach. So one of the idea of pain education is also to train people across disciplines to have the same language when they're talking to patients. I then had a bit of more of a look what's happening in Malta, and it seems to resonate exactly what we're seeing worldwide. So we stick with the 20% roughly, but with a tendency that we see more persistent pain as people get older. So the numbers increase in the above 45. However, if we're looking at younger individuals, there's a significant limitation to impairment in a lot of across life disciplines, across life dimensions. The reasons are various why someone can develop persistent pain, but a lot of them come from musculoskeletal problems. So that's why I think physios are often in the front line of dealing with clients who are already developed persistent pain or are at risk of developing persistent pain. So interesting, if we look more into this, into those conference proceedings, what happened also in 2018. So 2018 was a big year for worldwide with pain. We know that a lot of the costs associated with persistent pain come from being absent at work, not being able to contribute. And often there's a lack of availability of where people go to. I don't have the statistics right here, but there's a tendency that pain specialists you find them far apart. If we have a complex neurological problem, that's hard enough, but you have more neurologists than pain specialists, and the same with cardiovascular disease and also with pain, and a few other complicated health diseases. But with pain, often we find ourselves that the primary care provider, be it the GP, be it the physio, have to try to manage it. And hence, the push worldwide is to try to educate primary healthcare professionals, because that's where most of the people have access to before they get to a specialized pain clinic. And as I said, the waiting lists for those pain clinics are worldwide quite shocking. So this is sort of backed up by the global burden of disease, that if we look at it, what has the biggest impact on non-fatal burden of disease? The musculoskeletal disorders are on the very top, directly followed by mental disorders, mental health. And the same thing again in Malta, a recent study has shown the same thing. And here we also see the trends above 45. So with an aging population, it's very likely that these epidemic of persistent pain is going up, not down in the near future. So, and this is why in the Maltese consensus paper from the conference, which happened in 2018, really made it clear that also in your area, and this is the same across the world, we need to look at particularly persistent pain, slightly different to acute pain. It's apple and oranges. While in persistent pain always starts, or not always, but a lot of times starts from an acute pain situation, it then different mechanisms are starting to drive it. So this is why the EFIC, the European Federation of ESP chapters, and the ISP said we need to look at it as a disease in its own right. And as I mentioned, it's not being given the focus in our trainings as we might need it, but it's also not given the focus in a hospital setting that it took a while for pain to become a fifth vital sign, for nurses to check that people are not just surviving, but they are also not just dealing with pain. So we are starting to see momentum in the last years, particularly. So what's the current model to deal with pain? And that's for many years now, the biopsychosocial model. And that is both for acute and for chronic pain conditions, that we say if someone experiences pain, or even for someone developing pain, that it's not just depending on what happens in the tissues, but it's equally important what happens from their psychology, from emotional and cognitive processes, and also what's happening in their world around them. What are the social factors that can be an element that might push someone to experience more disability with an acute or persistent pain. So as I said, like the push to make pain a condition or a disease in its own right is now officially recognized in the ICD-11, which has come out in 2019. And here we see for the first time the chronic primary pain conditions and chronic secondary pain conditions. So again, there's a lot going on in Malta. When I did my little research for this morning, there are some links, and I will provide them at the end of the session. I will also provide the PDF of this presentation to you so that you can find the information easily. There's something happening in Malta that is not specifically regarded to pain, but it's equally important for pain. So it's looking at other health conditions in this patient empowerment, pain self-management, and patient professional communication project. So how do in this project, people are encouraged to be an active part of their recovery. And I really like this because we can exactly the same messages apply to our persistent pain patients. What is patient empowerment? That's pretty much what we want to do with patient education. For patient is to understand their condition, to be part of the decision making, to be recognized as there's a person behind a patient. Who is this human being who we're dealing with? And as I said, the patient empowerment requires very clear and understandable information. And yeah, we need to hear the story of the patient. There's Peter Sullivan, Australian physio, who people know, he always starts with, when he talks to patients, he always says, "What's your story?" And that's what I find in my own practice. It's very humbling to hear patients' stories. And so this is sort of setting the theme for how do we want to deal with our persistent patients who are not always easy, as you might know from your clinical context. So from the self-empowerment comes the skills for self-management. And coming from a physio bias is, of course, the idea of how can we get them active? How can we get them to exercise? How we can get them engaging in activities of daily living? And there are many other professions who work towards that. So we need to give them strategies, and we need to make those strategies easy understandable, easy manageable in their day-to-day life. And but they need to know why they do it. And this is sort of brings us back into a little bit of the realm of philosophy. Viktor Frankl is a Holocaust survivor, and he has done with a lot of questions why. From him, he says, if I know why, I can live with the how. If I have a good explanation for why I'm still hurting, why this pain hasn't been solved by any healthcare professional who I've seen. If I understand why, I might be able to live with the how a bit better. So working with I believe that if we can give people a very good pain education, if we can help them to understand their pain, we can work on that meaning. And then we can go into more of an active role. And as I say, like the ISP is very much supporting all of this. Putting the brain to work in cognitive behavioral therapy for chronic pain, the CBT approach, the cognitive behavioral approach, and many of the psychological approaches stem from the biopsychosocial model. So we need to engage the patient. The trouble is, as I mentioned before, sometimes these type of treatments are not very well funded. We don't often have the space and the time to do that. Pain education requires a bit of time, requires a bit of some resources to sit down with someone and explain them solidly and understandable what's going on with pain. So that sometimes provides a hurdle, a very realistic hurdle in both clinic and private practice alike. But that's why we need some of the policy makers to be on board, to give us fundings for this type of work. So in a nutshell, if I explain pain to a patient, what do I want to achieve? It's the first three objectives are, I want to reassure that they're safe to move. I'm reassuring that they're not falling apart. This is not need to be going on forever. So I want to reduce fear of pain, and I want to improve their sense of control over their pain. So building an internal locus of control that they can feel like they've got some agency here. From all we understand of pain science now in 2024 is that pain is changeable. Even though if I have persistent pain for a long time, it is still changeable. 20 years ago, we would have said our marching order in the pain management clinics was, that's what it is now, you need to learn to live with it. So this was the marching order very strictly. 20 years later, we can no longer say this. We can say there are so many things in your body that are constantly changing. We've got not just neuroplasticity, but we also have bioplasticity. So many systems don't change constantly. So let's use that. So let's reshift the focus. So it's not just about finding and fix it what's the problem of pain. Often that's not possible to find. But let's work with what is working and rebuild this and rebalance the system. So that's the motivation from our side. And this is a model which is coming from America. It's called the VMA model. So it sums up a nice therapeutic approach I can take. So before I jump, and there's even one step before education, and it's this validation of the person, building that therapeutic alliance, building trust. Before I jump into often quite complex pain science education. And then knowledge is to behavior like spaghetti to brick. One of the famous, Fordyce is a very famous behavioral psychologist, said, I need to understand, so what am I doing with this education, with this extra information? What am I getting from it? Why bother? Why do I do this? So that's when we try to understand what's the motivation of a person. What are their values? What are their goals? And often that's really hard to decipher. That's a job in itself, to trying to nudge out what's the intrinsic motivation of someone. And if we have those, then we can jump into the active part. Okay, let's move. Let's learn relaxation strategies. Let's learn movement strategies. Let's learn thought strategies, or look at your diet, look at your sleep, or whatever. Again, there are resources out there. If I'm at this point that I can activate someone, and I'm still missing good explanations, or I'm still missing good evidence, the EFIC has put out together for a few years ago, why we should move. Let's move. So there are a couple of the links to patient information we can use in our daily clinic. And very exciting is that there is a Maltese translation of the pain toolkit. It's something I think is coming up from England, Peter Moore, and he, as I said, there's been a funding provided to have this in English and in Maltese. And it's a good little tool of summaries of different pain management strategies. So I know it's late there. I hope you're still hanging in there. We just decided in this moment, I thought we're going to give a time for questions now, but maybe we just keep going if you still want to move, change. But let's keep going, and then we answer the questions afterwards. So let's come to the part that we talk a little bit about pain, not just this global situation of the problem. So what is pain? It's really hard to explain pain, particularly for someone, let's say someone's coming from Mars or from any planet where there's no pain. How on earth do I explain pain? Everyone has their own individual perspective on pain, things we would point out. And I leave that with you now, but I just want to say it's not easy, and we all play a role. We all have our own individual perspective on it, and we all have our own individual perspective of what are problematic pain patients. So people which are what we call like heart sink patients. When I see them in my diary for the day, I think, oh my goodness, like this will be hard. So problematic pain patients are not easy for no one. And Philip Siddle is a pain specialist in Sydney, and as part of their training course, what they're doing is he mentioned many years ago that we need to recognize that we are part of the solution and part of the problem, because depending what our conceptual understanding of pain is, determines a lot of things, what we say, what we do, even how we connect to a person. So this is the iceberg. So we're here. All of this underwater drives what happens in the clinic. And the same thing is when we look at the explained pain. What we know or what we believe to be the concept of understanding pain is what we're going to, that's how we're going to educate our patients. In reality is that if I have a very solid understanding of pain physiology, I most probably not need it all. What I need in the clinic to explain to my patients is maybe 10-15% of that solid base of knowledge. So I can handpick the information I want to give to a patient, but I need to be equipped with it, with much more dense and reliable information to answer questions, for example. And throughout the years, our understanding of pain has shifted significantly. So the biomedical model has been established in the 1600s by René Descartes, who basically said that as long as we have a pain, there is a source of nociception. There's some kind of damage somewhere in the body. So if I'm hurting, there must be something wrong in my body. And he was quite modern back then, because he said that information of the damage in the body is being sent to the brain. That was the first time they really recognized the role of the brain in pain. But then they realized that the nerves are not just one continuous line going in from the tissues up to the brain, but they go through relay stations. And those relay stations are both in the spinal cord, as in the thalamus, the two main gatekeepers, but then within a lot of other connections between nerves, and nowadays we even know between the immune system. And in the 90s, they had the technical abilities to do brain studies, and they watched what was going on in someone who says they have pain. And they discovered that there's no just one single pain center for brain, but it's always a network. We don't have a pain center in the brain. We have centers for speech, for movement, for emotions, for memory, but we don't have a center which is exclusively responsive for pain. So pain is always a collaborative approach of the neurons in the brain, which makes it complex, but also allows for a lot of treatment methods to come in at the same time. And that science, that understanding of pain is constantly evolving. I say to people, if they would have done the explained pain course 10 years ago, it would be far less content heavy. These days, we are expanding a explained pain course from 2 days to 3 days because there's so much more exciting information, and we need to honor that it's not just the nervous system, which is complex enough. It's not just the brain. It's not just the peripheral nerves, the spinal cord, the brain. It's also, as I said, a lot to do with the immune system, the stress system. We haven't even touched on all the gut mechanisms, because it's so complicated, but it's an evolving theme. And obviously all the psychology, the social determinants. So people are looking into this, and it will be continuing to grow the knowledge. So I'm taking hope from that. And maybe one thing which is very, what we need in the clinic is to understand there's a difference between pain and nociception. Pain is much more than a damage signal coming in from the tissues. And yet today, still in training, and we often look at physiology textbooks, and when you look at nerve fibers, C fibers, A delta fibers, you see them being labeled as pain fibers, even though they are sending damage or potential damage, but they never ever send pain. Pain is a construct of the brain, of many interactions in the brain. No, not just something which comes from the tissues. But this is one of the major confusion, that when we're dealing in the clinic, are we dealing with nociception or are we dealing with pain? And as I say, they say this, the modern pain science started in the 1965 with this landmark paper of Ronald Malsack and Patrick Wall, who described the gait control. And when I did my physio training in the 80s, end of the 80s, we learned about gait control. We learned about fiber types. The idea TENS was developed from it, that you can, if you bump your elbow and you rub your elbow, that it can change the perception of pain. So how can mechanoreceptors, mechanical fibers, hinder or at least dampen the information coming in from nociceptors? So that was groundbreaking. I think these days we think, yes, of course, it's possible. But it was the first time that people say a damage does not have to hurt, or an actual damage or potential damage does not have to hurt. It's always a matter of competing afferent input going through the nervous system. And that competing input, we know now, is also part of the stress system and the immune system. So even our gait control, if we move 40 years forward, we'll see you wouldn't draw it like this anymore. You would at least draw it like this and beyond. So this is a very up-to-date study. The fit for purpose model is something that is now being implemented in a lot of pain clinics, developed for low back pain. As we heard at the beginning of the presentation, it's one of our major contributors, or the major contributor to persistent pain. So understanding what is the so-called internal model in a person's system, what's going on. And I'm not even attempting to explain this graph, which has come from here, but it's complex. So coming back to more concrete things. So the ISB has spent a lot of time trying to define pain. So in 1979, we had the first definition of pain, and you see this here: an unpleasant sensory and emotional experiences associated with actual and potential tissue damage, or described in terms of such damage. Then with this growing knowledge about pain science, they eventually said in 1920, pretty much 40 years later, they said, we need to adjust our definition. And a task force was put together worldwide, and people were invited to suggest their own definitions. This took 2 years. And I watched the space quite interestingly, because there were fantastic definitions coming about. As I say, everyone's seeing it from their own lens, from their own perspective. So after much debate, this is our new definition of pain. And as you can see, there's not much difference. And I was really surprised that 40 years later, they more or less stuck with the same theme. They have not changed the official definition, but what they've done is added pain notes to it. And they are really quite fascinating. They say they felt compelled to say that pain is always a subjective experience, and influenced by many factors, both physical, psychological, and social. So they made it pretty clear. They also made it pretty clear in that pain and nociception are different phenomena. The third one say, throughout life, individuals learn the concept of pain, which means I can learn it, I can unlearn it. So I have agency to shift my perspective on pain. But I need to understand where someone is coming from before I even try to help him learn in a different way, him or her in a different way. And pain is adaptive. Without a person's ability to experience pain, we most probably would not survive very long. It alerts us to danger, but the danger does not always have to come from the body. It can be also very subtle in our psychological well-being or in our social well-being. And particularly for the colleagues out there who are working with people who can't communicate very clearly, who are infants in the older population or in the younger population or in neurology where people can't communicate their pain, we can look for other symptoms and signs, someone expressing pain. So this brings us to the idea of context. And if I would encourage you to read one paper after this lesson, after this little webinar, if you're curious about it, it's still one of my absolute favorites. It's a few years old now, but it's a neurobiologist's attempt to understand persistent pain. So it brings it in very humbly about, he thinks, what's going on? And at the moment, I haven't found any better summary as yet. He says that all sensory information must be interpreted in broad context in order to be homeostatically useful for the organism, and signals from nociceptors are no exception. Every cell, the smallest organism always strives to go into balance. And so do humans. We strive for balance. We want stimulation, but not too much. What the right balance is very individual. But everyone has their homeostatic set point. And if we're talking about pain, as I said, pain alerts us to danger. There's no doubt about that. But it needs to be weighed up. It needs to be looked at into context. So if there's an information coming up, this is a small simplified version of the whole concept, is saying, okay, that the brain will always, any information coming in through the peripheral and spinal cord will be weighed up according to how dangerous is this? Yes, no, do I need to pay attention? Do I need to do something? Yes or no. And as I said, things like, at the same time, this is an old study, 2007 now, but it's quite cute still and quite proven. Someone might have seen it. Lorimer Mosley presents it a lot. That if we set the same stimulus, in this case, a cold, noxious stimulus, if it's paired with a red light or blue light, we see different pain experiences. So if my noxious stimulus, harmless noxious stimulus, is paired with a red light, people describe more pain, versus if that harmless noxious stimulus is paired with a blue light. So the stimulus stays the same, but contextual factors significantly influence our subjective experience of pain. So what can be threats to our being, not just from the tissues? As I said, Brodal is trying to say, well, we all, as we go through life, there are always challenges amongst us. There are tissue damage. We come across tissue damage, even with our aging process. But in most of the time, if I have an injury which is challenging, causes pain, if my interpretation is controllable, understandable, I'm most of the time we recover. As I said, not every acute injury leads to persistent pain. We have 80% of people who are recovering. But what's the difference maybe between those 80% who recover and the 20% who we see worldwide present with persistent pain is that what's the meaning? Like, what kind of meaning are they attributing to the event? And what are they coming with? What they are, we know it's one of the big questions in pain science. How can we pick people who might be more vulnerable to develop persistent pain? No one yet has a simple answer for that, but we know that there are certain features at play. The cards have been drawn at birth, my hardware, my gender, my genotype, then the environment I'm growing up in or I'm living in. And the way this interacts can increase my vulnerability and my risk for developing persistent pain after a tissue challenge. So this is a huge research field to try to understand what makes someone vulnerable to develop persistent pain. So we have coming back, and this is a little bit philosophy here, but it's also very practical. The idea of homeostasis. As I said, every organism is striving to be in homeostasis. If we are out of our comfort zone here, we are adding allostatic load. So if I'm getting out of my comfort zone, I will have ways to come back to it. And that's sort of managing, this is allostasis. So just to get so if I'm out of homeostasis, out of my balance, that's okay. It's perfectly fine. But then I need to draw on allostatic mechanisms to come back into balance. I don't want to be a fish out of water for too long. I don't want to be out of my balance for too long. And the ability to come back into balance is also a different name of what we say to resilience. So resilience is bending, not breaking, is things can occur to me and I can get thrown out of balance. But if I have a strong resilience, I come back to it and I come back quicker. And so this is a nice concept if we think about that, what's happened with our patients, our complex pain patients. We have to admit, stress is life and life is stress. Stress is not always negative. We go through it, all of us and every one of our patients, and it's a constant process. And if we would be doing a manual course right now, and even if we walk into that classroom without pain, a skilled colleague might find areas that hurt if they press hard enough, if they mobilize in a certain way. We all have certain nociceptive sources in us all the time, but they don't have to hurt. So for a lot of things, the body just takes care about itself. I've got trust in my body that it will take care about a lot of things. I'm not even aware about a lot of things going on in my body. But when there's too much what needs attention, when things are happening too quick, like an injury or an accident, too soon, and if I have too limited resources at the time to get me back into balance, then this increased allostatic load might need additional help. So on a biopsychosocial model, challenges can come from all angles. I can sprain my ankle, and that's a very physical, first and foremost, it's a very physical challenge. So it's something happening in the tissues. Nociception is blurring, maybe some challenges to peripheral nerves. So it's a very localized physical event happening place. And depending how stable my system is, it might just stay a sprained ankle. But you might have seen people who come in with a relatively straightforward physical injury, and they also are emotionally suffering. They're psychologically really, really catastrophizing. They're not coping, and their whole social system falls apart because of this ankle sprain, they can't do certain things. So Problems are easier to be managed if they get kept in one layer of the biopsychosocial. But if one challenge, which can come at any level, just explodes and calls upon all other factors of life, that's when things become very complex, and from both in the acute as well as the persistent pain level. But resilience also can be seen at, can I compartmentalize? So a resilient person can deal potentially with problems happening in the social world with resources helping this person to deal with, to keep it there. But or a physical challenge can be dealt with on a more physical level, but we can compartmentalize things more. Where is the problem? What resources do I need? Do I need the social worker? Do I need my colleague? Do I need a physio? But think about some of your complex pain patients. Where do we start? They clearly have a lot of nociceptive sources in their body. So there's a lot to do in the body, but there's a lot of emotional distress. They don't understand what's going on, and their whole world is falling apart. Where do I start? This is when we need to start building resilience. We can't just go and find and fix things anymore. We need to rebalance, rebuild on numerous layers of the system. So that's coming from an article a psychology colleague of mine put together because we were trying to understand why someone with the same amount of tissue problems, this is my tissue injury. It's like a little schema. It's just a little graph. But it's the idea of it. What we wanted to express is that someone with the same amount of injury can feel pain very differently. And that it seems to be the balance. So while this injury stays the same, but if I have someone, let's use this person, who the injury happens at the time where they're already challenged and stressed in a negative way, maybe across other domains of their life. On top of that, they sprain their ankle. The pain might be roaring, particularly if their resources are already low. So someone dealing with a lot of stress in their life, having an acute injury and very limited resources might describe a lot of pain. On the other hand, where someone who has the same kind of injury, what looks like a similar type of injury, but there's no other challenges going on in this person's life, and resources are high, they might not even be aware about it. And you have everything in between. So if we look at pain from that balance between challenge and resources, we might find a way in to treat a person in pain. And if you have 3 days, I recommend you reading this article. It came out in 2022. And the funny thing is, one of our previous NOI instructor actually developed a course around that one paper. That course went for 3 days. There's so much in it. So this idea of the brain is a predictive processing machine. My nervous system has no sense of time. My nervous system can go into the past and into the future at any moment. As we're sitting here, hopefully we are in the present moment, but it only takes a blink and I go forward and think about dinner. If you haven't had dinner, think about the next day, or I go back into my day that has been. So my brain is constantly changing and it can predict the future. My sausage dogs don't do that. They don't predict the future. They're very present. That's the blessings of other mammals, but humans don't have that. My brain is a predictive processing machine. It constantly expects what's going to happen. And if I want to dial down those really complex paper, I would say that the pain is always a best guess of the brain. My brain is trying to understand, am I in danger or am I safe? what is dangerous at the moment? What's the safety cue? What's the threatening cue right now in my situation, and what possibly could be? So this is coming from the idea of the protectometer, which is a cute concept based, but I wanted to say it's based on a lot of other research. It's just trying to condense it, that balance of danger and safety. And all my systems in my body will try to work accordingly to keep me in balance, to keep me safe. So what is danger? Danger in me is anything that is dangerous to my body, my life, my lifestyle, my job, my happiness, my day-to-day function, and my integrity. So it can come from very different layers of the biopsychosocial system. At the same time, though, safety cues can also come from all different areas. I can feel strong in my body. I can feel healthy. I can feel mentally, I can feel happy. I feel confident. I understand the world. I feel certain about myself and the world around it. And as I said, this idea is that my nervous system always, not only my nervous system, my nervous system and my immune system constantly scan. Their antennas are up. They notice what's happening. And both in the present moment, but also what might be happening in the future, and also what happened in the past. As I said, vulnerability is a weird thing. So it goes across different domains. Current situation, my current beliefs, my behaviors, past experience, and just my general health. So the more dims a person experiences, the more the need for protection goes up. And what is the biggest protector? What am I always listening to? Even me as a healthcare professional. I might ignore a lot of warning signals, but pain normally grabs my attention. So my number one warning system, my number one protective system for that reason is pain. So if there's a lot of threat cues or danger cues within and around me, my need for protection goes up. On the other hand, if there are a lot of safety cues, my need for protection goes down. So not every threat cue, not every threat cue, not every danger causes pain. I might be dealing with people who I'm a bit uneasy with, but that doesn't have to cause me pain. But if other things come on top of it, I might develop a headache, or might develop a back pain, or whatever non-specific pain could show up when my barometer goes high enough in my systems of the body. So pain as a barometer for where am I in life with the balance? It's a good guess, but it's not the only protective mechanism. So other systems will also fire up, maybe even before I'm alerted to pain. And remember what the ISP says in their up-to-date definition of pain. Verbal descriptions of pain is not the only thing we see in someone suffering. We might see changes with the motor system, the endocrine system, the stress system, the immune system. So other things can show up if I'm significantly shifted out of balance for whatever reason. And as a third, situations people might be grumpy, they might be constantly sick, they might be constantly stressed, they might be really tense, they have sleeping problems, they might feel weak, even though they turn up diligently in the gym 3 times a week with you. They were not gaining much progress. What's going on? And the other one, another important feature is fatigue. Before pain comes, often people describe extreme fatigue. It's the other side of the coin very often. And that's why when we look at a lot of our burnout patients, similar mechanisms are in place as with persistent pain patients. As I said, the body will send warning signals often before pain needs to step in. But pain is often the last one, because that's the one in our busy lives, that's the one we listen to. So if I'm not listening, if a lot of threats are happening to us over and over again, these systems can become, they can learn and they can develop skills and they become more sensitive. They become more better at producing these warning signals. Not only the nervous system, but also the stress system, the immune system. So while they have our best interest at heart, they can be overprotective. And that's sort of when we need to think about, okay, maybe my systems have overdone it. So bioplasticity has now made me so sensitive, so fatigued, so tense that I'm not functioning. So they got us maybe into a situation of persistent pain, but the hope is that bioplasticity has got you into the situation. Bioplasticity can also get you out of it. And this is sort of we're coming to the end of the presentation. I'd like to leave you with this. Let's try to make bioplasticity work for us and our patients. Let's have an honest look at what are the DIMS, what are the SIMS in someone's life. And they can only tell you their story. That's why it's so humbling to hear the stories. What is burdening someone? And what are their coping skills? What's their resilience? Identify the DIMS, but also honor the ZIMS of a person. And then as much as possible, yes, let's modify, let's remove DIMS, but sometimes that's not even possible. And then it's particularly important, match the challenges with resources. Give people resources, because sometimes life is complex and complicated and we can't change it for our patients. But if the burden is here, let's try to build resilience. Let's try to build resources. And that could be getting them on a diet, a movement plan, giving them basic life skills. And I think any profession can do that, dealing with persistent pain. And this is why the ISP says we need that interdisciplinary approach when we're dealing with pain. And Patrick Wall, who's always been like a forefather of the modern pain revolution, is really saying it came up with this little quote. Pain is an existential thing for everyone. Let's try to look at it jointly from different areas. So that quote gets me every time. So I'm hoping I want to leave you with these thoughts. And we're 4 minutes before 9 your time. We've got time for questions. If there's anything you would like to ask, if you put something in chat, I'm still around. Cassandra, I would like to hand over to you to manage this.
Yes, of course. So we'll start from the first question from Maria. She asked this halfway through the presentation. It was when we are discussing about the shifts in thinking regarding pain through the ages. And she asked with regards to the graph showing the age of men and women having persistent pain. Do you think that menopause and perimenopause could be a factor given the average age of given the average age of menopause, could it be a factor with the change in shift of pain according to age of men and women?
Yeah, really good question. The hormonal system is one of the big systems in the body. So we've got the big three are the nervous system, the immune system, and the hormonal system. And exactly that, women tend to go through a lot of hormonal changes in their lives. And there is a lot of research now looking into this to understand this. Can I just point that out? So last week in October, the global year changes. So until this October, the global year was integrative pain care. As I said, really asking people to work together as a team. But to answer to this question, next year, the global year is in sex and gender disparities in pain. So was it Maria? So that's exactly what the ISP is going to look into it. How can we explain the slight dominance in persistent pain in the female population. So maybe a tip, if you go onto the EISP website, there are fact sheets throughout the next year. So from this October to next October, the ISP will put together fact sheets which sum up-to-date knowledge about different areas to do with the theme of the year. So hopefully hormonal changes will feature, and we can watch this space here. Does that help?
Thank you. Another question from Maria Luisa. With regards to mental illness being the second cause following MSK for pain, do you think that the current workforce is skilled to address this comorbidity in pain management programs? We tend, maybe as well coming from most of the attendees being physiotherapists, we tend to look very much at the MSK side. And possibly feeling less equipped to deal with the mental health side of things. What would be your input and advice about that?
There's such a thing, and there's quite a few articles on this idea of psychologically informed physiotherapy. It stems from the biopsychosocial model. We obviously have to make sure that we're not stepping out of our professional area, and not because we do have psychology colleagues hopefully near us who can take over. But if we're dealing with complex patients, and that doesn't always have to be pain, being psychologically informed would be a very healthy asset for us. If we really sign up to the biopsychosocial model, we can't treat pain without looking into what's going on with the emotional state of a body and what's going on with their beliefs. And having skills in that area, feeling more equipped in this area will certainly be of benefit here. And there are training centers who do this. That's exactly one of in Germany we're training people to become pain physiotherapists, pain OTs, pain nurses, pain doctors, and they all look from the same perspective onto the patient. And the idea is that in the pain management clinic where I'm currently working, but also where I was working 20 years ago in Sydney, the idea is that if my psychology colleague can't turn up to deliver a session with a patient, someone of the team can step in. I'm not talking severe PTSD. I'm not talking severe psychiatric illnesses. I'm talking to deliver an information session about why emotion regulation is important in pain, why thought challenging is an important tool and asset for someone. So the psychological strategies in pain management can be delivered across the team. The same as my psychology colleague can come in and say, okay, come on, let's do a stretch session. Let's go for a walk. Let's do something like that we are a bit more open within reason to go transdisciplinary a bit with pain. So yes, I would encourage psychologically informed training.
And this is something we'll be going into more detail with the course in November, I imagine as well, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
I'll talk about it a little bit later, maybe. Just a couple more questions if you're okay with that, Martina.
Absolutely. Yep.
So I have another question from Yahya about neurokinetic therapy, whether you've applied it and your thoughts about it.
Do you mind repeating what therapy?
So what is your thoughts about neurokinetic therapies? And if you've applied it, or do you have, what is your thought about this kind of therapy?
I would love to help, but I don't know it. There are
Okay, I was
many
going to.
treatments out there, and I'm not sure if it's something which is based sort of on the nervous system. So there are a couple of providers out there who offer neuro-based type of treatment. And I only know the one from America, from Z Health. I don't know if that's it or along the line, but that particular type, I don't know, so I can't comment.
I If Yahya's listening, maybe you could send me a message. In the meantime, I know we spoke about pain education in physiotherapy courses and at the undergrad level, and you mentioned it was about 15 hours of pain education for undergrads. I think in Malta, correct me if I'm wrong, because I know we have some people from the faculty joining in. Um, it's about the same time. Do you think, I mean, considering that time has to be shared with all other physiotherapy topics, what would be your, I guess, solution or advice on how to manage this better, how to enhance pain education without foregoing other topics like MSK, for example? Um,
Yeah, it's hard. Where do
uh,
we put in which basket do we put our eggs? I don't know. I'm just thinking, and there's been big push that explain pain courses or any of this type of pain should not necessarily just, at the moment, it's mainly in the realm of professional development. So if someone is interested in it, this person will train their expertise in pain. But there is this idea from the pain societies that it should be more an undergraduate level because it's so. What's the main problem in coming from what that brings people to a GP or physio? Often it is pain. So if I had a solution how to do it, I was working in Switzerland for the undergraduate training, and they had quite a clever model, I thought. They dedicated 1 month to pain, but it was coming from pain was a focus across the different subjects, like not just orthopedics, but also cardio, neuro, pediatrics. For that month, every different angle of physio looked at what kind of pain presentations do we see, what is the current explanatory models, and I have not come across that anywhere else, that they've done such a condensed month of focuses on pain, yet keeping their subject going. But they were all across the subjects focusing on one thing and highlighting that there are similarities. I don't have to make pain a single thing. It should be covered across the discipline. So I like that model, what they were doing in Basel for many years now, which is dedicating 1 month. But as I said,
I think
if I
that's a
had
really
a
good
simple
idea
answer.
and a good way to go about it, actually. And just one last question, and I like this question actually from Anthony, and he asks, so if we can reassure someone in pain that the condition is not serious, would that help with the pain perception?
Absolutely. And that is, though, based on the fact that all red flags have been cleared. So the main thing is we need to make sure that the red flags, anything which really demands urgent medical attention, has been ruled out. And that's where imaging is helpful. This is why sometimes it's good to have that imaging to make sure that no real nasty things are going on. And that's when I can reassure someone. Degenerative changes, little changes, might not be the cause of the pain. That's the other thing, though. If I start with imaging, I also need to be prepared to explain what else will show up. They will show everything which is not perfect in the good imaging scans, what we have these days. So and that's where then it becomes tricky. But the good news about imaging is it will rule out any nasty things. And
Mhm.
then if I have if this patient has been cleared, and that's a medical decision, then if I talk as a physio, then I say, hey, we're safe to move. We're not going to run a marathon straight away. We're not going to do bungee jumping straight away. We're going to build you up very gradually. And that's what we call graded activity, then graded activity. So we start with a baseline that is well in your tolerance level, and we gradually go up. Not too much, not too quick, not too soon, but you're safe to move. And I think that's one of our big messages, particularly as movement-based therapists, that we can bring across. Absolutely. Thank you for that question.
And that covers all the questions from today. What I would like to say is thank you for everyone who joined, and thank you, Martina, for this awesome webinar. I think we can all say that we learned a lot and put a lot of things together. Maybe before we close off, could you just give us a bit of an overview about the Explain Pain course? So, for people who are not in the know, we have, as you can see on the screen, we have the Explain online course. It's fully online, happening in mid-November. So it's over 3 half days. And Martina will be leading that course. So you can maybe just let us know a little bit more before we close off tonight.
Okay. With pleasure. The Explain Pain course, as I said, has grown and developed over the years. The first one was run in 2003 in Sydney, and the first one in 2006, I ran the first one in Germany. And I can honestly say over those nearly 20 years, the course has constantly developed based on what is new in pain science, which makes it a very condensed course, and that's why it's good actually to have 3 stops, because like there's a lot of information in it. So having it over 3 days is a bonus, so that we have a break between it, can let the information settle, then come back. So the format works if we're dealing with complex information from a learning perspective. But the focus of the pain science in this course is very much the nervous system, but more and more now also the immune system. That's from the physiology of pain. So that's the core of the course, is trying to give you the information, the 85% of which you then need maybe 15% to deliver to the patient. So it's training the trainer to deliver it to the clients. And then we look at the protectometer is a tool, which the last few slides which I introduced, it's a tool which will be a hallmark. It's one of the big ones to say, okay, how can I make this biopsychosocial model practical for a patient? So we will look at the protectometer. We will practice de-threatening diagnoses, even something like degeneration. How can I translate that for patients that it's not as fear-provoking? So while still being honoring what the experience is. So it's always that balance between being honest and truthful to the patient, while trying to nudge them along into a new perspective. So that's the hard part. And so we will have a chat about that. What am I seeing in the clinics, and how can my education try to shift that a little bit? Does that help?
Yes, I think we have all been faced with those situations where we need to nudge our clients in the right direction. So I want to say thank you once again. I think we'll close it off here. We have really good comments in the comment section. So thank you very much, Martina. I really look forward to being online with you again in November. So good evening
Thank
to
you.
everyone, and good morning to you, Martina, then.
Thank you. No problem. Have a good night. All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.